community services for the invite. In the next 30 minutes, also I have prepared the following outline for my talk on grief in Islam. We will dedicate some minutes for question and answer session, and I hope you all will participate and put in your questions in the chat. Okay, next slide. Am I able to control it? Okay. In Islam, all souls belong to Allah and will return to Him in time. Still, it is a painful moment seeing our loved one passed away. Only those who have experienced it can really truly know the depth of pain it brings when death strikes. So, grief, bereavement, and mourning are common terms associated with the loss of human life. Grief is real, and natural emotional response to loss is a normal mental response to anyone who's facing crisis in terms of death. It is unique to the individual experiencing it. And like what was mentioned, everyone experiences grief differently and on a different timeline. So the ability to draw upon the spirituality, it gives meaning to life, and during crisis, it gives you comfort and direction for individuals to navigate change. Next. We feel vulnerable. We feel raw, anguish, devastated, and so much pain. And there are a wide variety of responses which are unique to each individual. You feel shock and disbelief, sadness, guilt, anger, fear, and you can also feel the physical response to loss, fatigue, nausea, some even have insomnia. And what happens is that pain can also manifest it in different ways, the emotional pain or the physical pain. And the coping mechanism of individual differs from person to person. And it's also influenced by individual's personality, the family background, the upbringing, the culture, spiritual as well as religious belief and practices. Next. Basic concept of Islam. Allah has created the universe and each and everything within it. So each and every one of our possessions is the blessing of Allah. And He alone is the creator and owner of everything. So life in Islam is seen as life in this world is seen as temporary and it's a test for the human being. So Allah has prescribed rules for those who believe in Him, and those who abide by them will succeed and proceed in the hereafter. So in order to get to Jannah, the paradise, Muslim must also fulfill their Islamic obligation. Next. So let me introduce to the 5 pillars of Islam. In order to live according to the wishes of Allah and receive reward in paradise, Jannah, Muslim will attempt to undertake the 5 basic duties of Islam, which is known as the 5 pillars of Islam. The first pillar, which is the duty of any Muslim, is the Shahada, your declaration of faith, and they believe in one God and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Then comes the Salat, the prayer, praying 5 times a day at specific time. These 5 regular prayers in a day is a constant reminder of the importance of Allah in the life of a Muslim. Third pillar will be the zakat. That means an act of worship, which means donating a percentage of one's wealth to charity. And this creates a bond between the rich and the poor. And it also helps Muslims to purify their wealth and avoid greed. So zakat is usually paid once a year. The fourth pillar will be fasting or puasa. This fasting during the month of Ramadan are for those who have reached the age of maturity and are in good health. So women who are menstruating and those who are sick, you are not encouraged to fast. Muslim connect with Allah and remember that those who are less fortunate than themselves. So during the fasting month, you will feel the thirst, the hunger of the poor. The last pillar is Hajj, pilgrimage, doing your pilgrimage to Mecca. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we are not able to do so this year. Muslims are expected to undertake this once in a lifetime if they are physically fit and if they can afford it. So Muslims stress as a believer, the religion stress on the importance of humility, forgiveness, honesty, as well as kindness. And being a Muslim is not just about praying or ritual, it's also about being good to others. So by understanding the five pillars of Islam, you will understand next please, the concept of grief in Islam. So grief and loss actually are part of the test which Allah is putting us through. Illness, disability, adversity, pain, and suffering are all part of life. So no individual is burdened beyond its capacity to cope. Next slide. So this is a saying, and it's always what we as a believer hold on to. If Allah bring you to it, He will bring you through it. So in happy moments, we are supposed to praise Allah. In difficult moments, we seek Allah. In quiet moments, we worship Allah. In painful moments, we trust Allah. In every moment, we think of Allah. Next slide. So what happened the minute when you hear that there's death in the family or among your friends, your colleagues? The first phrase that we have to say is Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. Meaning, surely we belong to Allah and to Him shall we return. So whenever a Muslim believer hear of any death news, we will say this phrase as a remembrance of who we belong to and who we are returning to. Next slide. So the process of what they call it, the death funeral, will take place with the cleansing of the deceased body, the shrouding. Next slide. Followed by the last prayer rite for the deceased. So it can be done, the last prayer rite can be done at home or in the mosque. So there is a specific protocol or process that you need to do for a male, okay, and then for the female, where the person, the leader, or they say the imam need to stand. The next slide. So this is the final burial where there is a specific procedure on how the deceased body should be buried. So that is where the Kaaba is, the direction of the Kaaba, and the body is placed inside the burial lot in that manner, facing the direction of the Kaaba. Next slide. So what happened life after death? This is known in Islam as akhirat. In Islam, it is Allah who decides when a person dies. So Muslims believe that when they die, they will stay in their grave until the day of judgment. Then on that day, they'll be raised from their graves and brought before Allah and judged on how they live their earthly lives, their good deeds as well the bad deeds. This belief is known as the resurrection of the body. Next slide. So this famous J.W. Warden, he is a psychologist. He actually provides a framework to help us understand how people journey through grief. So he mentioned about the 4 tasks of mourning and how it is relevant to the Muslim believer who's going through the same process. The first task of mourning is to accept the reality of loss. So during this period, we as Muslims will focus on the immediate needs of the deceased. What needs to be addressed right now? So the most important thing is to make the burial arrangement and to attend to the deceased funeral rites, which must be done within 24 hours. So it follows by dua for Allah to give strength to those, to the living, and to help us overcome some of our challenges and difficulties on days to come during the mourning period. The second task is to work through the pain of grief. So usually as a believer, we are supposed to open our heart to Allah about our sadness. In our dua, we pray to Allah so that He will ease our pain, and we talk to our lost to others who are whom we are surrounded with, mostly your family members. The third task of mourning is to adjust to life without disease. It's quite difficult, especially if you are a widow and all this while your husband has been paying the bills, taking care of the financial expenses and all that. And suddenly when he passed away, what happened when you need to adjust to life without the disease is basically reorganizing some of your roles to address those tasks that the disease would have ordinarily taken care of, like paying all bills and, settling some of the household chores and all that. At this stage, this task is actually a step to develop the necessary skills that you need in order to move forward. And the last task of mourning, according to J.W. Wharton, is to maintain a connection to the disease while moving on with life. So for us, in order to maintain this connection, is to make dua for the disease. Every time after we finish our prayers, we make dua for the disease, and we hope for Allah to reunite us with our loved ones in Jannah, in paradise, and finding ways to continue the deceased legacy by doing good things on behalf of the deceased. Sometimes when the deceased is alive, he likes to sadaqah, he likes to give money to charity. So remembering him is actually to make a connection to the deceased, while at the same time moving on with your life. Next step, next slide. So there are 7 ways of coping with grief in Islam. One of it would be dua, supplication. Dua, supplications are the biggest weapon for a firm believer in Islam, and they are unquestionable. Basically, when you make a dua, it's just between you and Allah, you and God. So whatever that you have in your heart, you share with God. So that's why it's an unquestionable stage where no human will ask another human. It's between personally your personal conversation with God. So these are little things that as a believer that you can do, which is truly big in the eyes of Allah. And making dua for the forgiveness of the loved ones, those that is passed away, especially for the children who has who who have late parents, is strongly encouraged for them to do so. The more dua that you do, is actually your way of coping with grief in Islam. Next slide. The second way is to be sabar. Sabar means to be patient. Sabar, actually, a rightful Muslim, they demonstrate it by showing their reliance and contentment to the decree of Allah. Means this is what I have to do and I have to accept it. So it allowed the person to be grateful to Allah despite such losses. And it's knowing that Allah will never burden a soul with more than he or she can bear. So Allah designed the pivotal moment to pay off the loss with something much bigger in future. So that means you lose something now, but it doesn't mean that you will lose everything forever. There will be something in replacement. It's just that you have to be patient, you have to be sabar. Yeah. Okay. The third way of coping next is actually don't dwell in isolation. As a widow, there is a period of mourning in Islam, 4 months and 10 days. So during that period, what happened during the 4 months and 10 days, and the person have to go out, and to settle all these bills and stuff, like you are allowed to do so, but you have to do it immediately and you have to come back. So after that period of mourning, don't dwell so much in isolation, because it's quite common to be engulfed in grief with the death of a loved one. So one must not dwell in it much, because you're actually inviting the devil, the shaitan, to become the misery's company. So let the death of your loved one be a lesson of detaching from the dunya, from the earth, so that you hold on Allah in your heart above all others. So stay among people who love you and would support you through this difficult journey. That's why it's encouraged for them, if they want to have, a place to share, someone to listen, we can actually link them up to a bereavement support group. Next slide, please. The fourth way of coping with grief with Islam is aiding and forgiveness. Forgiving your deceased loved one for any of their wrongdoings what they have done to you is actually a great gift that you can give to them. You are actually freeing yourself from grudge or something that the person owes you. You are being merciful to that deceased person, which will also lead to Allah being merciful upon you as well. Example of helping a deceased brother with an outstanding debt that he left behind. That's also a way of aiding, and it's part of you coping with the grief in Islam, reaching out and helping the living ones in case if the deceased have debt that need to be settled. Helping with the funeral arrangement is also one of the obligations of a Muslim to another Muslim brother or sister. So in a community, right, whenever there's death of a Muslim believer, anyone in that community should be able to come forward and to say that, let me take charge of the funeral arrangement of this deceased Muslim brother or sister. So it's a way of coping with grief in Islam in a community. Okay, next slide. Next slide. The next way of coping with grief in Islam is sadaqah, means charity. Um, so to offer charity on behalf of the deceased, uh, so that the charity, it can be like a donation to a school, to a masjid, a mosque. Um, Sometimes you do sedekah may not necessarily means to give money or clothing. It can also be your way of performing a hajj or umrah on behalf of that deceased loved ones. So let's say if the person passed away at a very young age and he has never had the opportunity to perform his hajj. If you have done your hajj and you feel that you want to sadaqah in the name of the deceased person, you can also do so. You can also try to observe voluntary fast. Sometimes you fast and then you, in the act of good deeds, in the name of the departed, you organize sometimes a charity drive for the needy children. Because these are some of the legacy work left behind by the deceased person. That is also an act of sedekah charity. So this act of sedekah will allow the deceased to have insensate reward for the knowledge that they have imparted to the living one while they're still alive. And this will benefit uh, the person who's doing the sedekah because it will go into the book of deeds as well. Okay, next slide. The sixth way of coping with grief in Islam is to occupy yourself. We all need time to heal. We all need time to heal. We need to experience the feeling of grief. You never know how long you grieve. A day, 2 days, 2 years, you never know. But you need to experience it and you need to go through the process of healing. So in order, it's also imperative to keep moving forward despite the loss, because there's a tendency that you are stuck in the past. You keep on thinking about the past and then you're not moving forward with your life. To occupy yourself also, you can do things like going back to your usual routine. Uh, find out what your lifeline, people in the community or people in your family that can actually be your support. Because these are areas where you need to understand that in order for me to move forward, I must go back to my usual routine. Memories of the loved ones, the deceased will still be there, but I still need to move on with my life. Okay, move on. Now, the last ways of coping with grief in Islam is the importance of reflection. So uh, we encourage the living to think about death over and over again. Some of the ways that we do is to visit the graveyard, usually before the start of before the end of Ramadan or after the Ramadan. These are the normal period people go to the graveyard and clean up the area, clean up the tombstone and stuff like that. It's our way of remembering that um, that we have this current relationship and with Allah, because we know life is temporary, um, and our stay on earth is just a temporary process. So remind ourselves, especially about our loved ones and the people around us, that death is just around the corner. So thinking about death, there's nothing wrong about it, but it's just a reminder that life is temporary on earth. So you must do more to become better servant, faithful followers of Allah. And with us reconnecting with Allah upon a person's death, the deceased follower may get the rewards for the good works that we are doing. So whatever the living does in the name of deceased, when we do our prayers, dua, and all that, is also our way of reconnecting with Allah. Okay, let's go to the implications to social work practice. Next slide. I know among us today, some of you are social workers, are practitioners, counselors. Okay. When you do grief work with Malay Muslim community, there are three main kinds of help that can bolster our clients during grief or any major crisis in life. So spoke about the belief system, grief in Islam. I will just focus on self-support and environmental support. Let's move on. Next slide. For self-support, grief work with your client will be the importance of taking care of themselves, the importance of diet, to eat properly and well-balanced meals, exercise. These are all standard things that you need to remind them, important for good health, so that it can help to reduce stress and discharge anger or frustration appropriately. Sometimes they need to attend counselling or they need to go for any support group. And most importantly is rest. Rest will also include sleep, having some time to rest your body. Loving ourselves, comforting ourselves that, yes, we have lost a loved one, but, in due time, pray to Allah that you will be able to join your deceased and meet them in Jannah. Give ourselves the permission to take on less responsibility, especially during this period when you're grieving. It's okay. Delegate some tasks to your loved ones for other people to help you as well. Yeah. And accepting our needs and our own feelings. That we have needs, we have feelings, we want space to be on our own. We want space to talk to somebody. Some people will do it through journaling. Okay, next slide, please. For next slide. For environmental support, you need to identify the loved ones, the spouses, the children, family, or relatives, who that they can turn to for support. It can also be friends and neighbors, colleagues, even healthcare professionals, and what I mentioned just now, bereavement group, a group of people that come together to share about their feelings, about their loved ones and how they are coping. Next slide. For workers' consideration, when you work with a Muslim client, is the awareness of your own sensitivities and biases. Don't be afraid to ask, because sometimes a lot of things that you think that you are afraid to ask, it might, be you might hurt a person. It's okay, because you are actually asking in order to understand the situation better. But of course, you do it um, in the interest and in a respectful manner. We all use a lot of questioning, reflection, summarizing, as well as empathic listening. But there's also one consideration that I want to highlight for tonight is understanding the Islamic funeral etiquette. Next slide. To understand the Islamic funeral etiquette, there are some areas of concern. There will be a few things that I do not know how should I go about visiting my Muslim client's family, because there's death happening and I want to show my respect to them. So mourners at Islamic funeral, you can actually express your own grief, but of course in a certain standard decorum. Crying is permitted. If you hear some of your clients saying that, oh, I cannot cry, I'm not allowed to cry, but crying is permitted in Islam. It's only that you are not allowed to do loud wailing, uh, sacrilegious speeches, and cause any self-injury. Yeah. For traditional Muslim funeral etiquette, usually we forbid mourners from taking pictures in any other way or even recording any part of the funeral prayer service. Okay, next slide. So next slide please. So after the prayer service and the burial, right, usually the mourners, they are allowed to gather at the home of the immediate family. Usually we do this to express our condolences to the family and to support them in their grief. So there is some basic protocol, like for women and men to dress modestly lah. Yeah. So what we would like to suggest is partly because you know in a Muslim family, right? In Malay family, when you go in, you have to take off the shoes and all that. So clean socks and all that are appropriate. Um, you know, shirt and trousers and stuff like that. You don't really have to wear a hijab if you are non-Muslim. But an appropriate dressing, there are borders lah. Next slide. So for grief and coping, next slide. I have prepared. I have identified Elizabeth Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief. The denial. The denial is something like, you are in a shock, in disbelief that this death cannot happen so suddenly and this can't be happening to me. And then Elizabeth Kubler-Ross also mentioned about anger. Why is this happening? Who is to blame? So usually when we approach the situation, we know that they have the right to be angry, and this is part of the stages of grief. It's not linear. It can happen at any stage, at any point, if you're not necessarily in denial, anger, or bargaining. Yeah. Sometimes they even start with depression, that the person is too sad to do anything, that they're not able to pray, not able to make any dua. They're just totally affected. Yeah. And then the last stage will be for Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She mentioned about acceptance, being at peace at what happened. Being at peace at what happened, that means the loss doesn't mean you totally forget the memories of your deceased, your loved ones. So David Kessler, who is also a grief expert, he put in another stage, which is called the meaning making. So meaning making, meaning comes through finding a way to sustain your love for the person after their death. So what can you do in order to sustain your love for the deceased after their death so that you can move forward with your life? So like what I mentioned just now was the act of sadaqah. That means doing charity work, continue with your deceased, your loved ones' legacy of doing charity work. And also your role, because you've gone through grief, you understand how it feels like. You can be a supporter to others in time of their loss also, because of your ability to empathize with the struggles. The other thing would be remembrance of Jannah. Jannah means the paradise. So usually when you make your dua, supplication to Allah, is you're asking Allah that one day, in the afterlife, you will get to meet your loved one, the deceased. So you are encouraged to imagine reuniting with your loved one in a place of internal peace and the feelings that will arise from that reconnection in the afterlife. Okay, so next slide. Workers assessment. This is just a tool that maybe you want to consider using. Standard biopsychosocial assessment of client, the spiritual assessment. These are some of the questions that you can actually ask the client. How do you make sense of what is going on for you now with the loss of your beloved one? With the how do you make sense of it? Meaning asking the meaning behind the loss, and how does Islam guide you in looking at this? So I mentioned just now some of the 7 ways of coping with grief in Islam, ideas of aiding and forgiveness, stuff like that. How is this way of looking at things helpful? Your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and how does this help you cope with the pain, and how it helps you deal with your stress? How how are you able to deal with stress, making meaning of the situation that's happening that you're encountering right now? What sort of things do you do that you find helpful in relaxing you? Next slide. And the typical thing when you engage family who are going through loss would be to understand whether there's any history of psychopathology or stress-related medical condition, or whether there has been any unexpected or violent death before this actual death in the past. That means that there has been history of death of spouse or child. Whether there has been any indication that there was a high dependency on the deceased by the living, meaning those that pass away. What are their roles? Whether they are playing an important role in that family, and most importantly, the risk factor will be high if the family does not have any strong social support network. Next slide. The protective factors will be to look out for social support typical of the Islamic community. Sometimes in that community, there's a mosque, there's what they call it, support group running, and then there are some rituals, gatherings, religious services to assist the family. Usually, after a death occur and after the burial, we come back home. The deceased family will be too tired to prepare their meals and all that. So usually we will provide food, practical assistance during this mourning period. Then we zikir and all that. These are all part of the dua that we do together as a family. Because when we pray together and make dua together, we feel there's a strong bond and strong support coming from the community. And it can also be from the relatives and from the neighbors also who are very close to you. Okay, next slide. So we are actually reaching towards the end of the presentation. These are some of the community resources that you can actually explore for Singapore Muslim Casket. They have their own funeral director that can do they can take over the process of preparing for the deceased body, and then for the burial. They can do actually everything and anything for you to make sure that the burial process is smooth. And then there's Muslim Trust Fund Association that actually provide assistance for the needy family. You can also reach out to Muhis or Islamic Religious Council for assistance. So these are what they call it, the webpage that you can go into and check out the services that they provide in helping the family to overcome their loss and to support them in the funeral rites. Okay, so I hope I'm doing good with time. It's already 8:40. So the next slide will be question and answer session. Okay, so I pass it back to our admin.
Thank you, Ms. Zahara, for sharing your years of experience and knowledge on turning to faith for support in time of grief and bereavement. So we'll now take a look at the questions from our participants.
What are your thoughts on partnering Bomo or Dukun and supporting people through the process of grieving? How has your experience in partnering the spiritual healers been? Okay. I never partner Bomo or Dukun in the process of grieving, never. But I understand their role and the significance of their role in the family, cultural, or maybe upbringing or background. There's specific role that they play for this Bomo and Dukun. Basically, in order to understand the situation, maybe some fear, they feel fear in terms of maybe the deceased soul is still in the house, for example. Some of them actually will say things like, oh, they have seen the spirit of the deceased person. So the role of the Bomo and Dukun is usually when they engage them is to make sure that they are able to send the spirit back to the afterworld. Yeah. So that's the role that they are playing, and the belief of that family system. Usually I don't challenge them. Yeah. I respect whatever things that they are doing, because when we work closely with them, it's very good to understand where is it coming from. So what I do is usually I will try to assess the needs, whether it is causing them problem in terms of managing their daily activity to the extent that they are not able to perform their usual routine. They become so ill that they are not able to go back to their normal life. So it becomes a very big concern to me. So I will work closely with the family, and then we'll see how best we can refer them to our mental health expert. Yeah. Is that okay? Then I move on to the second question. The second question asks, can the surviving family member be sure the deceased is in paradise? There's no doubt where the deceased is after death. Okay, nobody can be sure whether the deceased in paradise, but we can always dua. You know, dua is unquestionable, right? You can always make the dua. It's your conversation with Allah. You pray that that the deceased will be in paradise with all the good deeds that he have put in, all the efforts that the charity, the sadaqah, and the fact that he is actually doing his obligation as a Muslim. Yeah. So usually we will have good feeling. Lah. We will have good feeling when somebody whom we know during the lifetime, um, always very helpful, very sincere in helping others. We have good feeling that it is a good death for them. Yeah, but to be sure, only Allah, Allah will know. Yeah. Okay, let me move to the third question. Are Muslim realities okay with non-Muslims healthcare workers using the word Allah to support them during bereavement visits? Honestly, it's not an issue. Um, it's not an issue in terms of using the word Allah. It's actually how you say it and why you are saying it. How you say it is because it comes from the heart that you really want to reach out to your Muslim relatives or client. And you use the word Allah in order to bring them back to be religiously sensitive. The fact that their God is called Allah. Yeah. If you ask me, I don't think it's a big issue. Yeah. Oh, okay. There's a few more questions. I answer all, is it? Admin?
Zahara, so far we have compiled 5 slides now. So
Okay.
each slide with 3 questions. So you may want to manage the time for each questions.
Okay. Okay, sure.
All right.
What are some of the common issues Muslims may prefer counseling approach to help with grief instead of seeking a spiritual elder? Granted, there will be overlap in some aspect. Okay. Muslims who prefer counseling approach to help with grief, maybe it could be some issues of relationship. It could be the interpersonal unresolved relationship with the deceased. It's got nothing to do with religion or anything like that. It's just about maybe some conflict, unfinished business, and then when they seek counseling, it's more of understanding how he can learn to forgive or move on with his life. For spiritual leader, usually leader will usually say sabar, uh, what do you call it? Forgive, be patient. But of course, I think it depends on the needs and the issues. So it depends on the needs and the issues why the person choose to go for counseling approach rather than to a spiritual leader. Okay, I would like to clarify 2 things. I once heard that in Quran, there's a saying that 40 days before one's death, there'll be angels coming so the dying could prepare. Is it true? Some people perceive pain in dying as part to clean sin and soul, thus refusing medication. How to deal with this respectfully as a healthcare worker? Okay, this is about the angel of death. Usually, they say even within 100 days, you can even smell or you can even have some feeling that death might occur. For an external person who you can actually observe some of the changes in the face. They say the nose will drop or something like that. The ears will drop, and then they know that pain is part of their way of cleansing the soul. So if you feel more pain, you are actually eradicating, getting rid of some of the sin, some of your bad deeds. When they refuse medication, it's always because of some underlying reason. It could be if it's morphine, they will think that morphine then it'll be addictive, then will be then it's not appropriate for the dying one. But I think it's all about understanding and giving them the knowledge. So you need to give a little bit of psychoeducation to them. Why this medication needs to be administered to help with the pain and all that. So it's always sometimes is the misunderstanding about for example, morphine and the use of morphine on people with terminally ill. Yeah, but there are Muslims out there who are okay with morphine even when at the terminally stage. Yeah. So what happens if a person who converted to Muslim but before death expressed wanting to revert back to his birth religion? Is this allowed? Actually, no one can say no. You are entitled to your own decision. So whatever decision that you make, nobody can stop you or question you. So if this is allowed, you ask me, it's your choice. I cannot stop you. Nobody can stop you. Yeah. Okay, go on. The next one. How much faith is required for a person who lost a young child? You will go through the process of grief where you feel very angry, you deny, depending on how long the stage of grief that you have to go through. Sometimes you're so angry with God, you're so angry with people around you. Especially this is a lost young child, very young child. We have, many years actually to live and to appreciate the world, and then suddenly taken just like that. Yeah. So how much faith depends on the support lah, the protective factor, the people around him or people around her. I think this topic will be discussed in Viriya Community Services under, I think, miscarriages or something like that. I hope they will address this topic lah. Okay, I move on. When will it become haram if you cannot resolve your grief? Because following the faith should give you to resolve the grief. When it becomes haram, there's specific things about haram. Haram means not allowed. I don't think it will become haram. It's just a matter of maybe you will start questioning God more, the role of God. Why is God like that? You become so angry with God. So to the extent that maybe you feel like God is not fair towards you lah. Yeah. So your grief actually will lead to deeper anger. Yeah. That's why when people who are grieving, I mentioned about the 7 ways coping in with grief in Islam. You cannot let that person be alone. The more angry the person is, the more you need to engage him and to understand the loss and the grief that he's going through. Yeah. Okay. So there's no such thing as haram. Yeah. So is it permissible to prolong life artificially, and at what point it is allowed for medical team to pull the plug? This one I really cannot answer leh. This one you got to ask. We have this fatwa committee. Fatwa committee, they decide lah on the rulings, and they are formed by the office of the Mufti under the Islamic Religious Council. So this question, I think only that fatwa committee can answer. I'm so sorry. Okay, let's go on. Okay, the next slide. How can we engage the religious teacher, the asatiza, yes, or mosque to assist our clients with their grief and bereavement process? Are there current networks in place for this kind of work to happen? Okay, currently, what happened is that for grief and bereavement process, there is no dedicated asatiza group that looks into this kind of support services. You can approach asatiza. Usually what I will usually recommend you to do is you ask the family member whether they have any particular ustad or ustazah is the female one, or mosque that they go to or not. If it's a nearby mosque or particular ustad that they always go and attend their teaching, my suggestion is for you to encourage your client to go and seek help from that ustad, because that ustad will understand his student better, or go back to the mosque where they always go for their prayers or for their religious classes, and to seek help from them. from individual. Yeah, but so far I've not heard of any asatiza group that provide this bereavement support process lah. Yeah. Okay, next question. What is your opinion of palliative sedation for Muslim patient? I was told that before a Muslim patient passed away, there's prayer sentence that need to speak out. If the patient sedated, then cannot tell the prayer. Oh, the prayer is the shahada. Remember the 5 pillars that I told you? The first is the shahada. That means you must say there's only one God and Muhammad is the messenger. Usually you will whisper to at the ears of the patient. Yeah. Not necessarily that the patient is able to speak the word in full, but as long as he can hear you, saying it repeatedly, that is actually good enough. Okay, when does Muslim aware of the 7 ways of mourning? They learn from young through family. Actually, when you go for any religious classes and all that, right? Or even if they they attend basic religious classes nowadays, our kids will go for their weekend classes and all that. They will tell them what is this dua all about. So there's some certain duas that you can make when you are sad, certain duas that you can actually read when to cool you down when you are angry. So all these things are taught. And then there's certain prayers that you can do. Let's say at night if you cannot sleep and then you keep thinking about your worries and all that, you're encouraged to do prayers even in the early morning. So all these things are taught. Okay, and you can learn. Yeah. Okay, many times we hear them say reda. Reda, is that considered religious? Actually, all these are Arabic term lah. Reda. Reda means you accept the decree from Allah. So this is the test for you. So be reda means accept. And I'm not sure whether any of my Muslim friends out there, what is the translation for it in English. But you accept the fact that this is happening, is God's test for you on earth. Would a Muslim feel offended by a non-Muslim telling them about the 7 ways of mourning? Actually, nobody will feel offended unless you say in a very disrespectful way lah. If you say in a very nice, gentle way, like when they're crying and they're angry, then you just say, one thing I heard is, in Islam, the importance of sabr. It means patience, right? So the only thing I can ask you is to be sabr. So that's one of the ways you can approach it in a gentle way, but also in a curious way, whether you are saying the thing correctly or not. So your Muslim friend will be shocked to say, wow, must make dua or be sabr or give sadaqah. So I don't think we will feel offended lah. Yeah. Could you share how is suicide, euthanasia, abortion seen in Islam? Nobody can actually take their life away unless it's Allah decide that it's time for you to go and leave this earth. So suicide is a no. Yeah. Euthanasia is also like a suicide, right? You plan something on your death. Yeah. Abortion, actually 2 things, If the abortion, you have to do abortion and it's harm the body of the mother, it's not safe, then the fatwa say that abortion can be done. So this one is the work of the fatwa committee. What I mentioned just now. If you want to know more about suicide, euthanasia, abortion, right? You go to the MUIS website. You can go under the tag of fatwa, FATWA. All the informations are there about suicide, euthanasia, and all that. Yeah. Okay. Any other question? We are 2 minutes away from 9 p.m. Back to the administrator.
Okay, so thank you for all of your questions. If you have any other further questions, do feel free to email in to us and we'll have Ms. Zahara respond to them. If you also like this deck of slides, there will be an option to leave your email in the feedback form as well. So we have come to the end of tonight's session, and we hope that this has been a meaningful session for everyone. We would also like to apologize for the technical error earlier, and we
Yeah,
thank
so
you for your
sorry,
kind
guys.
understanding. So we would like to express our sincere gratitude to Ms. Zahara for taking the time to be here and helping us better understand how we can potentially turn to religion or spiritual beliefs for support when facing grief and loss. Thank you very much, Ms. Zahara.
Thank you
In
so
the
much.
following 2 weeks, we will be having another 2 sessions. So next Thursday on 8 July, we'll be looking at grief in Buddhism and Hinduism. And in the following week, on 15 July, the topic will be on grief in Catholicism. If you are interested in attending the other 2 sessions, do register at the link stated. Viriya Grief Support Programme has also planned for other events from July to October. From 7 July onwards, we will be starting our bereavement support group, Voices of Grief, which falls on 5 consecutive Wednesday evenings. On 12 August, there is another online forum, Understanding Grief in Miscarriages. On 19 August, we will be holding a virtual death cafe where you can talk about anything related to death and dying. Lastly, there'll be a grief support skills-based workshop on 23rd October from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. for those who wish to learn basic knowledge and attending skills and support individuals going through bereavement. So if you're interested in any of these events, do sign up at the respective links as indicated in the slides. Before you leave the Zoom meeting room, please help us to fill out the feedback form via the link or QR code. You may also click on the link provided in the chat box. And if you have any further questions and enquiries, do feel free to contact us at the email stated. With that, we thank all of you for taking the time out to join us tonight and have a great week ahead.
Thank you.